I'm Mike Brilla, host of the Inspired Teacher Podcast, a part of the Education Podcast Network, just like the show you're listening to now. Shows on the network are individually owned and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other interesting education podcasts at edupodcastnetwork.com.
Our civic history, our Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Reconstruction Amendments, all of that make up who we are as a nation. And you don't have to love everything about our nation's history to appreciate that it's a part of who we are today. And so I think it's just so critically important for understanding the body politic today, who you are as a citizen, if you want to start to envision yourself as having a role in the body politic. It all relies on that civic inheritance, the same way that you as a person, right, have been shaped and formed by your genetic and familial inheritance.
Hey, welcome back. Steve here, and today I'm talking with Julie Silverbrook. Julie is the Senior Director of Partnerships and Constitutional Scholar in Residence at iCivics. Our focus is National Civics Day, the importance of civics education, and iCivics. Oh, this is so cool. So much to learn today. You're going to love this, and you're going to learn a lot too. Nice. By the way, before you go, it'd be so cool if you went to my website, stephenmiletto.com/reviews, and left a review. Could you do that for me? You are awesome. Enjoy the show.
It's the Education Podcast, your favorite show, with lots of groovy guests and they share what they know. So crank it up to 10 and let your neighbors know that here's another show with Dr. Steve Miletto. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. Teaching, learning, leading K12. With Dr. Steve Miletto.
Julie Silverbrook serves as Senior Director of Partnerships and Constitutional Scholar in Residence at iCivics. She served as Executive Director of the Constitutional Sources Project, ConSource, in Washington, D.C. from 2012 through 2020. She regularly writes and lectures on the United States Constitution and its history and the importance of civic education to the health of the American Republic. Julie has nearly a decade of experience in growth projects for nonprofit organizations, cultivating partnerships, fundraising, coalition building, and business development and management. She holds a JD from William & Mary Law School, where she received the National Association of Women Lawyers Award and the Thurgood Marshall Award, and served as a senior articles editor on the William & Mary Bill of Rights Journal. She graduated Summa Cum Laude, Phi Beta Kappa from the George Washington University with a BA in political science. Upon graduation, she was awarded the GW Columbian College of Arts and Sciences Distinguished Scholar Award, the highest academic award given to a student in the Arts and Sciences College. About iCivics. iCivics is a nonprofit organization working to inspire lifelong civic engagement by providing a high-quality and engaging civics resources and advocating for civic education through its Civics Now coalition of 295 organizational members. Founded by Justice Sandra Day O'Connor to develop free educational video games and lessons that teach young Americans to be knowledgeable, curious, and engaged in civic life, iCivics is the country's largest provider of civic education content and is currently used by up to 145,000 educators and 9 million students annually. All of its resources are free, nonpartisan, and available online at iCivics.org. Julie, thanks so much for being on the show today. Say hi to everyone.
Hi, my pleasure to be here with you.
Well, glad to have you here. And, the day that we're recording this episode is October 27th, which is National Civics Day. Could you talk about what this is and what type of events are happening today?
Sure. National Civics Day coincides with the anniversary of the publication of the first Federalist paper. The Federalist paper is famously written by Alexander Hamilton of Broadway fame, as we all know, James Madison, and John Jay. And those newspaper broadsides were first published and circulated in an attempt to get the United States Constitution, which was signed on September 17th, 1787, ratified by the states. They have since become basically an explainer on the Constitution. And so many people from U.S. Supreme Court justices down to K through 12 civic and history educators and students look to the Federalist Papers as a guide. lots of exciting events happening on National Civics Day. I just wrapped up a panel discussion that was hosted by Long Island University to celebrate National Civics Day earlier this morning. iCivics partnered with Nickelodeon, Paramount, and Attention to launch a new series of videos that are animated and have popular or sort of pop music in them that appeal to students ages 2 to 11. The idea is to kind of create the modern day schoolhouse rock. And that launched this morning in Philadelphia in the Independence Hall Visitor Center, where First Lady Jill Biden provided remarks and former First Lady Laura Bush provided a virtual set of remarks as well. So there's lots of activity happening. iCivics really pleased to be involved in a number of exciting National Civics Day celebrations.
Very cool. Very cool. I appreciate you talking about that. And, I got to say this. So a new schoolhouse rock, huh? So we're going to have something in a modern version of like, I'm just a bill, I'm just, whatever.
On Capitol Hill, yeah. So the series is called Well Versed. You can find it online at iCivics.org. And so we encourage folks to reach out, but it is really targeted toward our youngest Americans and really starting to build that foundational knowledge and excitement for civics and history at the earliest ages.
Very cool. That is awesome. So why is understanding of our civic history so important for young Americans? What do you think about that?
Yeah, so I always talk about this through the lens of the intense interest that people have in understanding their own genetic inheritance, their own ancestry. So Ancestry.com, 23andMe, these programs are like hugely popular amongst people because they want to fundamentally understand what makes me who I am, right? Our civic history, our Declaration of Independence, the Articles of Confederation, the U.S. Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Reconstruction Amendments, all of that, right, make up who we are as a nation, right? And you don't have to love everything about our nation's history to appreciate that it's a part of who we are today, right? And so I think it's just so critically important for understanding the body politic today, who you are as a citizen, if you want to start to envision yourself as having a role in the body politic. It all relies on that civic inheritance, the same way that you as a person, right, have been shaped and formed by your genetic and familial inheritance. And so I always analogize those things when I try to explain to people, why is this important? Because people can understand on the personal level, sometimes harder conceptually, on the sort of citizen level, the political level, why this is so critically important. And the founders of our nation understood that why this is important. George Washington, in his first inaugural address, said that the American experiment in self-government relied almost exclusively on what was entrusted in the hands of the American people. And so he understood that our citizenry needed to be educated, and they needed to have a means to meaningfully engage in their communities. And really, that can be anything from helping your neighbor shovel their driveway so they can get to a doctor's appointment. That's civic engagement. To running for elected office. That's civic engagement. And so really understanding what your role is and what your role can be is so critically important.
I love that. It's so important, but so much so. And I think that, too often there's other things that take a higher level of importance, whether it's the latest whatever, fill in the gap of whatever pop thing is current, that is out there on the media or whatever type of social media or whatever that is. And I think that whatever we can do to find that little thing that'll grab their attention to say, hey, pay attention to this. This is good.
That's really the premise behind iCivics. That's why Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, when she retired from the Supreme Court, despite the fact that she had never played a video game, she went and talked to some very smart people at Stanford University about the efficacy of video games. And she said, this is a way to meet young people where they are, to provide something fun that they want to do, right? And while they're doing it, they're learning about civics. And we hear this anecdotally from students, parents, and teachers all the time. Students who go and play our games, even though it's not assigned to them. Parents who are playing games with students because it's fun and it's engaging. And so she used to say, it's not your grandmother's civics. And I think that's so important. Meet people where they are and come up with a fun and engaging way to get people excited to learn more.
Very cool. But by the way, I got to make sure I say this. I forgot to mention this earlier, but I saw on your list of people that were attending today or participating, wasn't Tweed Roosevelt in there?
In Long Island University, yep. And actually a number of descendants of former presidents were on an earlier panel discussion at Long Island University talking about the importance of civic and historical knowledge and, talking about how the members of their family who served as president always saw that as something that was really critically important. And so much so that their families are carrying forward that message. So there's a descendant of James Monroe there. So you're talking about many, many generations since he was president of the United States, and that family remains committed to ensuring that our nation's young people, especially, are fully civically informed.
That's so cool. It's neat because I when I saw some of the participants, and you see all these, the generations that lead back to whoever that president was, it was cool. And a few years ago, I started taking a couple of these free classes with Tweed from that he did online, dealing. One of them had to do specifically with Teddy Roosevelt and his trips down the Amazon, and as well as other stories that he told. But it's very cool that that you have these descendants who are participating in that celebration today. Nice. All right. So how can we help people better understand the text, history, and continuing relevance of each major section of the Constitution? Thinking about through efforts such as iCivics, the Constitution Explained, that segment of it. What do you think? What helps?
So we developed a 35-part short form video series. The videos are all about 2 to 4 minutes. They're animated. They're designed to convey a lot of knowledge in a short period of time that break down the text, history, and continuing relevance of the U.S. Constitution. And again, that's using a form of media that is really compelling to people across the learning spectrum, from our youngest learners to adults who are scrolling online or they're on YouTube. So these videos are not only available on iCivics.org, they're also available via YouTube. And so again, it's trying to convey this information in short segments, because we know based on research, like 2 to 4 minutes is about the amount of time you can capture someone's attention on a particular topic, and present it in what we think is a compelling and entertaining way, but also that really packs an informative punch. So it's a great series. Check it out if you're interested. Again, it's on iCivics.org, or you can find it on YouTube. And it's for people who don't want to take an hour-long course on each piece of the Constitution, who really kind of want to get that general powerful overview and get a real sense and flavor of each piece of the Constitution. And then from there, you can decide where you want to do a deeper dive, or if you want to do a deeper dive, But the goal is really to convey some basic knowledge. And I also think it's really important to say, with both our games and with these kinds of short form videos, we really see these as gateways to deeper civic knowledge. So we do hope if you watch the video or you play one of our video games, you are inspired to go and learn more. But if you do not feel that inspiration, we're very glad that you are getting some baseline knowledge by watching or playing those games.
Awesome. So let's talk a little bit about it. We're going to come back to the games and technology in just a minute, but talk about how our current education system is not really addressing the needs of students in understanding, and grasping civic education. I mean, how could it do it better? What do you think?
I think, over the course of the last at least 50 years, we have seen the gradual erosion of classroom time devoted to civics. And so I think something that's critically important to address is we're just not devoting enough classroom time and resources for young people to learn about this. And because you're talking about 5 or more generations of Americans who have been educated in a system that has de-emphasized civic education, despite the fact that the original vision of public schooling as conceived by our founders was citizen preparation, that these generations themselves don't know as much as they need to know about civics. So we need to increase classroom time. We need to increase resources for the use of innovative learning tools within the classroom for students. And importantly, we need to have professional development, professional learning opportunities for civic educators to address the gaps that they have in their own civic knowledge, because they themselves went through a system where there weren't that many classes on civics. And then they're not actually required to take civics if, most teachers go on to higher education in most states, although that's not the case in every state. They're not required to take a civics or history course in college. And so really wanting to make sure that everyone who is involved in the civic education ecosystem has the resources, tools, and knowledge they need to be successful. So that is something that's very, very important to us here at iCivics.
I can understand this. It is something that is sorely lacking, and we have to work on how to get that to become part of the fabric again. And one of the things that I think is fascinating. Let's go back to the technology and the gaming and all of that, because obviously that's designed to create interest in what they're doing. To not make it something. I'm sorry. As a former history teacher, one of the first things a kid says to you is, "Do I have to know this? And why do I need to know this? And is this on the test?" And you're like, "No, stop it. That's not. History is more fun and more interesting and engaging than any of that." And but that's usually the first questions. Civics was similar. So talk about just a little bit about that. You were going there with the iCivics technology and the gaming stuff that's going on. What's it look like? What's that that experience like?
It puts the student at the center of the civic experience or the historical experience, and it makes it very real and personal for those young people. And so again, we're about to enter a big presidential election year in 2024, and our Win the White House game is hugely popular, not just with the K-12 students who we work with every single day, and their teachers who we work with every day, but also with the general population, learning how do you get the requisite number of electoral college votes. And it appeals to, and I think this is why gaming, part of the reason why it's effective is it sort of appeals to your competitive nature, because you're like, oh, I want to win the White House, right? Or, I want to get the most points. And so in a way, it makes something fun that, to your points, even, a lot of times people are like, this is dry rote memorization of facts. Well, you're actually getting facts and core knowledge, as well as some civic skills and dispositions and values through these games. but you don't realize as a student that that's what's happening to you. You think you're just playing a game and it's compelling to you for that reason, and you're actually acquiring the knowledge, skills, and dispositions as you go through the game. But again, it's an entry point. There's only so much you can do in 30 minutes of gameplay in terms of conveying core knowledge. And so we have we basically provide to educators who are using the games in the classroom what we call a game sandwich. So it's material before they play the game, so they have some contextual information to make the gameplay more meaningful, and then kind of debrief materials after the game where you can really sort of consolidate the knowledge that was transmitted through the gameplay. And that's really, really important for getting that knowledge encoded into the student brain. But we routinely hear from young people, now that iCivics has been around for a little while, saying like, oh my goodness, like I loved my civics class because I played your games. That's incredibly gratifying for us. I should also say, well, we have many games and we continue to develop new games. We also have a range of other resources, simulations, lesson plans, videos, all sorts of resources to reach educators and students where they are.
Very cool. That is awesome. This, it's and that's a big part about it, because, I would think that some kids, as they approach a game, might worry that they don't know enough or have enough background. And it kind of sounds like you don't need to have like this huge background in civics to be able to do well at this.
No, you could play it cold, and not have that kind of pre-class experience with an educator. We do think the games are most meaningful when you have that before and after educational experience, but you could certainly learn plenty on your own.
Excellent, love it. Let's talk about this. I mean, how does a student get to use iCivics? I mean, is this marketed to schools or school systems, or is it something that can be addressed to parents and students, or do they just have to find it online?
So we work with about 145,000 educators actively use our resources every year. It's the primary vehicle for reaching the 9 million students we reach with our resources every year. But iCivics is also free for anyone, including parents and young people who want to play our games or access our resources outside of the classroom. So while we primarily market to educators and to schools, we are fully open for parents and students as well, and encourage those groups to come to our website to learn more.
Excellent. Love it. One of the things that this era is going to be marked by is the divisiveness that's been going on over the last bunch of years and continues to. How do you think civic education can help bring us together?
Yeah. One thing I just want to say is that political polarization has existed as long as human beings have been convening together. We'll put it that way. So one is, yes, political polarization is a pathology in our body politic. But it's almost like an embedded pathology, right? Anytime you bring human beings together, they are going to disagree. Why civics is so important is because our system of government is truly founded on an essential number of compromises in order to bring the country together to move forward. Every time this country has leapt forward, it has been because people were willing to set aside their differences, compromise, and move forward, right? And so I think you have to look at both of those things as embedded features, right? And you want compromise to be the thing that overcomes the very human nature instinct to disagree and to operate in your own self-interest. And so for people to understand our civics and our history is to understand that sometimes we still operate in our own self-interest. That's why there's sort of checks and balances in our system of government. But those checks and balances are designed to driving people to the negotiating table, to compromise, to find a path forward. And I think when you understand that, right, and that becomes a core value for you, which requires that you understand our history in order to get to arrive at that as a value, then I think you will have, hopefully, citizens and leaders who are more inclined in that direction, right? The same way as if you're being raised in a family that siblings fight with each other, right? So if you have parents who encourage you to find some kind of compromise point where all of the siblings gave up something but got something in return, you'll have a family with more harmony than a set of parents that just says, fight it out amongst yourselves, excuse me, and see how it goes, right? I mean,
Right.
So when you drive it down to that level, I think it makes more sense to people, right? It's like harmony in the home is a value. Harmony in the body politic is a value. But in order for that to be a value, you have to understand why that has merit and why it's been a key part of human progress toward more freedom, more equality for all. And so that's why teaching this stuff is so critically important.
You know, it is interesting because, we went through a decade where a president and his brother were, and a very powerful leader for bringing us together. All three of them were assassinated. And, and you go back in time a little further, and there were, lawmakers battling it out, actually duking it out, in the chambers and knocking the senses out of each other. It is something that happens in the time to time as they try to kind of work together.
Human nature, that's human nature, right?
Right.
Some people have better self-control than others. And, while there is a history of violence in Congress, and wonderful historian Joanne Freeman has documented that, there's also a much larger history of people choosing not to engage in violence in order to put forward a political agenda, and choosing not to duel, right? And so very important to emphasize that as well. So I know, when there's, violence and fighting can be sexy and interesting to people. And when there's all smooth sailing, that's sort of less interesting.
Right.
But if you are for functionality in government, I'm much more interested in the fact that if you look over the course of our history, there's much less fighting than there is fighting. Which
is a good thing. just like them to find that again. It's like, can we get there again somehow? That's but that is a good reminder, very good reminder. I mean, because there's I have a uncle who's not fondly remembering, but does remember a time when he was warned by his father not to drive a certain way through to get home from downtown Chicago because there were people firing across this expressway at each other. So at least we're not there yet. It's like, or at least we calmed down some of that. I don't know. But
and we the people get to choose who our elected leaders are. And if you value compromise as the best way in a constitutional democracy to push forward freedom and equality, then you will want to elect people who are committed to compromise and not committed to sound bites and partisan talking points and the fights and the social media sound bites and all of that kind of stuff. And again, understanding that history, that's essential to how our system of self-government must work, helps people realize that, like, oh, maybe I kind of don't want that guy. I think he was like super snarky and that was funny to watch. on YouTube. I'm probably not going to vote for him because I don't think that's because I dispositionally, I don't think that's what's best to achieve the end results that we as a society hope for.
It's so important to understand. I mean, at some point, really understanding our history and why how the government was put together and why it was put together and what it allows us, what tools it allows us, as opposed to there's so many nations that are in the news right now that do not have access to the freedoms that we have in this country that unfortunately allow us to fight with one another too. But it is fascinating. All right. So, unfortunately it's too late for this year because we're talking on National Civics Day. But share a few thoughts about why students, parents, schools should participate in National Civics Day and seek to use iCivics, because obviously it comes around each year, right?
So I think there are a couple of really core civic holidays throughout the year. So on September 17th, it's National Constitution Day. October 27th is National Civics Day. July 4th is obviously Independence Day. And then many people don't know that December 15th marks the ratification of the amendments that came to be known as the Bill of Rights and is known as Bill of Rights Day. And so I would just encourage, use those civic holidays, use those days off, Veterans Day, all of those, Memorial Day, all of those opportunities to learn more about the system of government that we have in this country, learn more about our history, learn more about the sacrifices that various people have made throughout our nation's history to ensure that we have the liberties that we have today. And it will just, I think, motivate you to have a greater appreciation for the fact that you live in a country where there is relative peace. You live in a country where, for most people, there's clean running water and plumbing and electricity and air conditioning, and where you can dissent, where you can go protest without fear of being arrested or killed. And so I think in order to fully appreciate those things, you need to learn about our system of government. You need to learn about our history. I hope you do it 365 days a year, but if you don't, please use these civic holidays as an opportunity to do that. I would hope that educators as well as parents and young people are inspired to do that. iCivics.org is online every day of the year. So come check us out anytime. But if you feel inspired to celebrate one of these civic holidays, definitely come and see us. We're either launching or promoting our most popular resources on these civic holidays. So we hope people will take this as just an opportunity to have some focal points throughout the year to think about where they fit into the body politic and how they can get themselves more informed. Very
nice. And, as we're getting close to finish up, before I go on with a couple questions that I have that are just some general questions, if someone to reach out to you or connect with you and or learn more, where would you send them?
Go to iCivics.org, go to the team page, and all of my contact information is there.
Awesome. And I'll put that information in the show notes so it's easy for them to find and get in touch with you. So good stuff. So Julie, just a couple more questions that I like to ask my guests. And the first one goes like this. How do you overcome feeling like you want to quit or give up?
Oh, that's so hard. I'm an eternal optimist. And so I'm just designed that way. I was raised that way. And so it's hard for me to find myself in a moment of despair where I want to quit or give up. But if I ever find myself feeling like this just isn't worth it, we're never going to make the kind of progress that we want to make. I tend to think about like the bigger picture, the greater good, the common good, and that usually overcomes any inertia that I'm feeling. Or sometimes you can say, this path that I chose to achieve my goal is not an effective path. Rather than quitting, you could say, what are the other paths that I could take And does that, will one of those paths potentially be more fruitful for me? So I try to think in those sorts of directions. And then sometimes something that you're working on isn't working. And so you have to say, I'm going to abandon this effort and take on a new one, which I think will be more effective. And that's not quitting. That's learning from failure.
Nice. I like that. Awesome. And just a note, all you got to do is look at your bio and someone understand that, yeah, I don't think quit is part of your vocabulary. So you've achieved quite a bit. So kudos on that too. But thank you so much for that answer. That's awesome. I like that. Last question. Do you have a teacher in your past who made a difference in your life? If so, who was it? What would you say if you had the chance to say thank you?
So I have two. One was my middle school social studies teacher, Rich Lochran, and he was such an innovative teacher. And the other was my AP U.S. history teacher, Trudy Chapman. And I say thank you to them almost every year because I'm so grateful for them to inspire me to have the love that I have for civics and history, and for that to carry with me throughout my time in higher education and into my career. And I also want to thank my parents because parents are educators too, first and foremost. And my parents instilled in me and my siblings a deep love of our nation's history and a deep appreciation for why being actively engaged in our communities at various levels is so important, not only for enriching our own lives, but enriching the lives of everyone around us.
That is cool. Love it. Thanks so much. Julie, thank you so much for sharing about National Civics Day, understanding civics, and iCivics. Awesome focus. Wishing you the best in all you do.
Thanks so much, Steve.
Hey, you have been listening to Teaching Learning Leading K12, a podcast to help you help kids achieve their dreams. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the Education Podcast Network. Podcasts for educators, podcasts by educators. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is a member of the podcast network based in Canada called Voice Ed Radio. Voice Ed Radio, your voice is right here. The opinions expressed on Teaching Learning Leading K12 are those of the guests and host. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is intended to share ideas, advice, and suggestions. Teaching Learning Leading K12 is produced for educational purposes. Hey, thanks for listening. It would be awesome if you visited my website at stephenmiletto.com and connected with me, left a review, and listened to more episodes. And by the way, you could also share it with your friends, with your family, and your colleagues. Thanks so much. You're awesome.